Hello and welcome, everyone, to a beautiful day in the world of tone. Today is an amazing day in Tone Town. I must say, we have the great Justin Ostrander here with us, the pride of Nashville, one of the great session guitarists in town, and we're going to be talking to him about all things related to gear, playing sessions, maybe some tips and tricks to break into the scene if that's something that you're considering, moving to Nashville and becoming a guitar slinger. Welcome, Justin Ostrander.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah,
welcome,
absolutely.
welcome.
So the first question that I have for you, Justin, and I should first preface this with, Justin has an amazing YouTube channel, and I really love to see guys in his position where they are professionals that are making their living playing on, as Justin puts it, songs in Nashville. That he gives you this inside look as to, his thought process, his development, even some cool videos on analyzing other people's recordings that have submitted them to him, and he gives them his tips as to how it can be altered to kind of make it more in alignment with what the expectations are that are put in front of him by producers and engineers. And I think it's just a really amazing resource for guitar players just in general, and you get to hear a guy who can really play the guitar as well, so that's a bonus. So definitely do check out Justin's channel. We will have that in the show notes and in the description so that you can see that. But Justin, my first question is, as somebody who is always refining and building different pedal boards, I've been in the process of building what I consider to be sort of a Nashville staple pedal board, just to see that if I put all the Nashville staples on a pedal board, will I actually sound like one of the great Nashville session musicians, like a Justin Ostrander or a Derek Wells or a Tom Bukovac? If you were to say to somebody who is building a pedal board, and let's just say has somehow gotten their way into the session scene, can you think of what would you say are the core elements on a rig that you would need to have based on your experience in terms of pedals?
Whew. So the entire board.
Yeah, let's just build this thing from the ground up. Money is no object.
Ooh.
What are the things that you feel like are staples that you're going to need for a Nashville session?
Okay, so I talk a lot on my channel about how I run my amps, first of all. And
we will get to those too.
Yeah. Well, this informs the way that I set up all my pedal boards. So basically, I run through an amp that is on the edge of breakup, almost always. And I like being able to hit the strings hard and have all that swirl around the note, but also to be able to back off and have something that, as Tim Pierce puts it, reads clean. It's not dead clean, but in a mix, you're hearing a clean, a hairy clean, I guess.
Yeah.
So with that said, my pedals, as far as overdrives and stuff go, I use them to sort of push the front end of the amp. I'm not looking for a big volume jump. I'm looking for something that's going to kind of melt with the amp itself and sort of work together, So for me, like on the board that I've been carrying around the most, my two overdrives, I've been using a Jackson Audio Golden Boy because I'm a really big fan of the Blues Breaker circuit. And that pedal in particular is really cool. It has an independent boost. There's a bit of a learning curve. I kept wanting to step on both switches at the same time to get drive and boost, and then it would go into some mode, of like selecting gain levels and everything. And I've figured it out. I've learned it, but that was hard. And then of course, I mean, you have to have, I think it's almost a requirement. You might get a ticket if you show up to a session without some flavor of a Nobles ODR,
Yeah.
You can get written up, tone police. So with my pedal board, like usually the first pedal is a fuzz, And for some reason, for the longest time, I've been stuck on the original old Morgan. I think he originally called it a shadow fuzz.
Yeah.
You know, that pedal just sort of erupts in a way that I really like. And it's got a bit of that sag to it. If you hit it with really hard pickups, it brings in this octave down frequency on the lower strings. I can really get it with my gold top. It's super cool. But I go from that into the Golden Boy, into the ODR C. I'm playing a Nordland, is what's on my board.
Nice.
But I did just get the new Keeley pedal that I really like. They
Screamer
gave me one of those, and the Noble Screamer. Yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah. That's awesome. I go from that into a volume pedal. I want all of my overdrives in front of the volume pedal, you know. And then after the volume pedal, I have a GE7. That's almost a requirement too. I'm probably going to do a video about that pedal because I think it's the most useful pedal that almost no one steps on very often, you know. And then from that, you really have to have some preset go-to things as far as your modulation and delays and reverbs. And I'm using an HX Effects, you know. I think that it's very intuitive. It sounds a lot better than the older M series stuff. And, you know, there's incredible players that are still running the M series pedals and you know, that's fine. I just thought that with the HX, Line 6 sort of brought the audio quality and the conversion and just the quality up to like an Eventide level, you know? So I have that as well. I have the Eventide H9, and I have a little Dunlop Echoplex pedal. And then all three of those are being tempo controlled by a mini smart clock.
The disaster area.
Yes.
Very
So
cool.
if I find out whatever the BPM of the song is, I reach down and dial that knob, but I can also tap it if I want. And the way that I run those three pedals, the HX, the H9, and the Echoplex pedal, is that the Echoplex and the H9 are inside the HX. They're loops. So whatever pedalboard scene I'm on the HX, those pedals, Echoplex, then H9, they come after my last delay on the HX and before my first reverb. So whatever the scene is, whatever I have as those 6 presets, those two pedals are in that chain in those spots. And yeah, I feel like a couple of good overdrives, you know. A good amp is always key. I'm a big fan of just a great sounding amp. Like, pedals to me aren't going to fix something that you don't like about the way your guitar sounds straight into the amp. It's there to enhance and to push the amp, you know. And then I just sort of ride that line on the edge of breakup, and I can get good mix levels with my delays and reverbs, and they don't overpower everything. A lot of people who watch my channel, like they'll comment on the fact that you really hear all this space and repeats and whatever when I'm just showing them what my tone is. But then when the track is going, that stuff isn't quite as apparent. And that's the whole thing. It's like you'd miss it if it wasn't there. It's creating space and giving you this image of where your guitar sits in the entire mix, but it's not overpowering. I'm not overcommitting whoever's going to mix that to my effects levels, you know.
Yeah.
That's a big consideration. For my
and do you ever run any of these effects in effects loops or after the mic or stuff like that, or is it always in front of the amp typically?
Man, the sound these days is just all of it in the front of the amp.
Yeah.
And I did a video where I demonstrate how well that can work. I did a video on my 3 favorite settings for a Tweed Deluxe, right? For like a 5E3 circuit. And I have the amp pretty well dimed. And I'm using the guitar volume controls to get a cleaner sound. Well, then I step on a reverb pedal, a Maris Mercury 7, which is one of my favorite reverbs. The plate on that is so good. And you know, the conventional logic is that you're going to run into all sorts of issues. Running modulation, running delays, like your repeats are going to be way too loud into a cranked dirty amp. Your reverb mix is going to sound weird going into a distorted signal. And man, there's a spot on there where I show, like, look, if you back things off with the guitar and you clean up the signal you're sending into the amp, it really can work. You know, I've never used an effects loop. I think that was just way before my time. I've always been a combo amp guy with a pedalboard, and you know, if I'm doing any effects, they're on the mic. They're coming out of the speaker. Yeah. Very rarely I'll put a very subtle stereo verb on a part as a suggestion. You know, that stuff in Nashville when you're playing on songs, that's more the engineer's purview, the mix engineer. I don't want to commit and make his process or her process more difficult because they're hearing this. They've got this way that they like to use reverbs and some delays to really make everything pop. And then I've already got this like ultra reverb drenched part or something. So again, just subtlety. It's all about subtlety to me.
When you deliver most parts, are they almost always in mono, or how often are you able to deliver a stereo track that's, let's say, 2 amps or something like that?
Man, I can count on one hand the number of times I've run a stereo rig on a session. It's just, you know, like, I don't know.
You hear that, everybody? You hear that, all you stereo perverts?
Don't listen to him. Would that be the same live as in sessions? Like if you were going out on tour, because I know you mentioned the channel, you toured for something like 6 years, sounded like pretty well straight. Would you also run mono there, or would there ever be a scenario live where that differs?
No, I totally ran stereo live.
Okay. So sessions and stereos are sessions versus live, are different beasts in that regard. Like your rig could drastically change potentially depending on the live gig.
Right, yeah. So with my live gig, I was the only electric guitar player. And it was my job to take all the parts off the record. This is the reverse of what I do now. It was my job to take all the parts off the record throughout the entire song, pick out, okay, what's most important in the intro? I got to grab that. What's most important in the verse? In the first verse, it's usually me not playing, you know. Then I got to grab the most important chorus part. And so I pieced together a single live part based on whatever is the most important. And sometimes, you know, I'm playing this chorus part off the record and the artist is like, man, I really just want big chords. Can you do that? Okay, great. So because there's only one electric guitar on almost all of the gigs I had, I was on the Sarah Evans gig for a while, and there was another electric guy on that. But, you know, it was my job to fill things out. And even the way I would play lead sections, you know, sometimes it was a line with a droning open string. You know, you go for bandwidth as the only guy. And so my rig for the last like 3 years of touring, I had a Princeton Reverb and a Morgan JO12. I talked to Joe about wanting to run something like Mike Campbell would do, where he'd have a Princeton and a Tweed, you know, and he would blend the sound of them. My problem was I wanted to do that, but I wanted them to be left and right of a stereo mix. And since I was coming out of pedals that are putting delays and reverbs into it, well, the front end of a 60s Princeton compresses a lot differently than the front end of a 5e3. And so using
just the speakers on their own on those amps.
Right. Yeah. That's a big part of it too, is the speaker. Yeah. You'd get real lopsided effects, like the mix level, because of the way the Tweed compresses, is totally different. So I told Joe my problem. I was like, I need a Tweed amp that responds to, delays, reverbs, boost pedals, whatever, kind of like my Princeton Reverb. And he's like, oh, I got just the thing. And he sent it to me, and we made a couple tweaks, and that was my rig. So I did a Mike Campbell-ish, with all the stereo effects and things to create just a really big sound. I think when you're the only guy, the only electric guitar player, it makes a lot of sense. On sessions, I'm never the only guy.
Yeah.
Even if I'm just...
Sorry, you go. You keep going, Justin.
Oh, I was just going to say, even if I'm the only electric player on the session, I'm stacking multiple tracks.
Yep.
So I have to think like somebody who's playing with another guitar player.
I love one of the things you've just mentioned, and also mentioned on your YouTube channel. And I feel like this is where I have a lot of areas where I'm a very weak guitar player. I don't consider myself a great guitar player at all. And I notice this especially, and I would love to get your perspective on this, is I feel like where I am weak, and I see a lot of weakness in other guitar players, is the need to always play. Like I always have to play something because I have a guitar in my hands, and sometimes I'm the only guitar player, and I feel the need, like I got to fill this space. But the thing I appreciate about great guitar players, especially if you're talking in country and in Nashville, is they know how to stop playing their instrument and leave space and take a breath, as you kind of phrase in solos and stuff like that. And the ability to know and to have the skill when you can shred 1,000,000 miles a minute, but to be able to just stop and then really put focus maybe on the downbeat of the next chorus. It's like my notes will stick out and be more valuable if I stop now and wait until the downbeat of the next section, whatever it might be. Can you speak to that? Because you're even saying in the live example, in the first verse, you often wouldn't play, and you're the only guitar player. So how do you balance that? How have you learned over the years of playing and the years of gigs that you've done to when it's a good idea to stop playing versus when you really are needed and need to add something?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and that's something that I deal with song to song. Like my job, everybody's job on the session or in the band, is to make the song translate. And the biggest component of that is what is the dynamic shape that the song needs to have, right? Like, not only, like we have to decide, is the intro big? Are we all up? And then we tighten up for the verse. How long is it from the intro to the chorus, So if there's like a double first verse, then you've got to build that time that it takes you to get to the chorus. Like say you have a big intro, long double verse, and then everybody's back in on the chorus. Well, that verse needs to be broken up into how people are going to enter, right? Mm-hmm. And the big joke that I always toss out, it's kind of passive aggressive, I guess, because sometimes you're in there with an artist that's like, man, I like that. Do that more. We need to do that more. We need to another chorus, And I'll get on the talk back. I'm like, yeah, man, let's leave them wanting less. And and they kind of stop for a second. They're like, and like that can be kind of, depending on how you deliver it, that can be kind of a jerky thing to say, but it's also making a valid point. Like, we don't want to fatigue people. We want the song to be over and people to be like, man, I love that. We don't want them to be thinking about they're ready to move on by the time you're still singing the chorus hook over a long outro. And it's like, no one likes this as much as you do, man. So it really, it just comes down to the shape of a song. And I can make things more impactful by reducing the amount of space I occupy, Like the intro, maybe, man, I came up with such a cool part. Well, it's not about me and the part that I came up with. By the time we get to the turnaround, yeah, you know, we want to get back into the second verse. We want to feel backbeat. We want to feel the band driving verse 2 into a second chorus that has even maybe a slightly bigger gear shift from the first chorus, right? And so maybe that turnaround needs to be half as long. Well, it's not about me. I can play my part in that turnaround for that half as long as what I did in the intro. And, you know, I think end of the day, it comes down to the shape of the song and how we build that, how we retain interest, how we make the lyric most impactful from the start to the finish. So
love it.
I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Any other questions, Brian or Grant, about pedalboard gear before we move on?
Oh yeah, pedalboards.
I do have one, but I'll let Brian go.
Yeah, I did. So because I was scrolling through your channel and your social media, and I saw. Do you have a separate studio board versus a live board? Like, do you? I know I've seen some guys like, this is my only. Like, I actually built a rig for a guy who's like, this lives in my studio, and it was like, excuse me, it was like 40 by 20, and it had everything you could think of, like the kitchen sink and its brother. Like, it had literally everything, and I've seen people do like, yeah, this is what I need for this session or to do this session. But then like you'll go and see other guys where they like, they'll have just like a tiny board, or they'll have really basic, really minimal stuff. And I'm like, that's how you get through like a live set? He's like, yeah, this is all I need. I just need the staples. So I'm curious, do you have two separate boards, or do you typically use one board for everything?
I've got 3 boards. Okay.
Very cool.
So,
very cool.
The biggest one is at my feet right here. It lives at home. I've got big vintage pedals on it, and I love this board. I've gone through it. I've done a video on the 2 boards that I use for recording. So those are some of the more popular videos on my channel. If people go to my channel and search by popular, they're going to be in the first few rows of the results. So this one just has a ton of options. It has an old CE1 on it. It has a Voodoo Vibe on it, which is one of my favorite tremolo pedals, by the way.
I think Michael Landau too uses it for tremolo and after all the drives and stuff like that. So not ordinarily where you might find a Univibe on a pedalboard. Yeah,
exactly. That's really cool. Mine's in front, but I still in front of the drives. But I do just love the tremolo on. It's gorgeous on that pedal.
Is this the board? Sorry, I was going to say, is this the board that has the timeline and the Mobius?
Yes, sir.
On
yeah.
It? Okay, cool. Yes. I saw that from 5 months ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's the big one. That basically stays here.
Does that have a memory man too, Justin?
It doesn't.
No.
The other delay pedal on this is about the earliest DM2 that I could find.
Yeah.
The original Boss Black Label DM2.
With the Panasonic MN3005 chip.
Very common, easy to come by, and affordable. I've heard about the original DM2.
I think it's the highest priced pedal per max delay time.
Yeah, definitely.
If you pay per millisecond.
Yeah, exactly. But man, just the space that it makes around a note and the sounds, like I'll use it with, and you got to be really careful about where you put the knobs, but I'll use it with a really short delay, really high repeats, and use it as almost a reverb. It's the repeats are so close together, and the delay time, it kind of ends up being a pad. And I've done that on several videos on my channel. The board that I carry around is the one that I described at the beginning of our chat here with the HX, the H9, and the
very cool
Dunlop Echoplex pedal. And there's a video about that on my channel as well. And then live, man, I try to get away with as little as possible live. I mean, unless there's parts that that require some delay or whatever, I will go play a cranked Princeton reverb with a fuzz pedal and just my little reverb and tremolo foot switch, and I will go for broke on that. And I've had so many guitar players, like when there's a gig where there's a bunch of artists in a row or whatever, I don't do this stuff very much anymore, but I would go out there with a Tele, a Princeton reverb, and my little Morgan fuzz pedal. And these guys would look at my rig and they'd hear me play. And then they'd look at their space control center, mission, just giant, the pedal board's so big, how'd you fit that in your car?
Right.
I'm like, oh man, what am I doing? Is the response I would get often, I'm like, I'm not sure. Because for me, it's like, I went through that whole phase where the board just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I had literally every option ever. And then I started treating the way that I play the way everybody started treating music when they had 10,000 songs on their iPod. It's like, what do I listen to now? It's like option overload,
Yeah.
And so I talk about this a lot, restrict all those choices. Take that away. Get back to just the music, Let your pickups actually see the input of the amp, without a bunch of other things in the way, and see what comes out. It's different, you will be inspired by not hearing the same old thing that you do, because, when you hear a song at this tempo with this feel, oh, I know I need that reverb, that delay, that boost, I'm going to be on this pickup setting or whatever. And you just get in these ruts. In so many different ways. And one of the ways for me was by just relying on a giant pedal board. So I was like, screw it.
Yeah.
One more little bit about that. I did the first couple sessions I did with JT Cornfloss, which if you guys don't know him, he was the sweetest, most gentle, very unassuming guy. And he sounded like a dragon, on the guitar, just the biggest tone. And he would use almost nothing. The only pedal that he regularly used on his tiny board on sessions was a tuner, and he just was so musical. And you think, oh man, he's the guy that shoots from the hip and plays raunchy rock telly rhythm stuff. And yeah, that's true. But man, when it calls for something else, he'll go there. And it's always about the musicality. It was never well, I've got this Strymon setting for this kind of song or whatever, and I was so inspired by the way he played that I stopped bringing a pedal board to sessions for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
It started freaking people out a little bit. They're like, how are you going to get your sound? I'm like, man, it's going to be great. Don't worry about it.
Well, I had
go for it, Brian.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just saying, I have a friend from years ago. I worked for the amp company Jackson Amp Works over here in Dallas.
Oh yeah,
and so I know Brad and them, and I'm good for. I know I'm friends with. You may know him because he's in Nashville. Justin Weaver. He's a good friend of Brad. Justin's
I
great.
hate that guy.
And
that guy's
he's incredible. And
I
the
love
first
him.
time,
he's one of my
first time I met
best friends in town.
Yeah. He's great, and the first time I met him, I come from the worship background, so pedals galore. And there's all sorts of more reverbs, more blessing, as some of these people say. And kid you not, I had a guy who had two big skies, and I was like, "Why did you have two big skies?" He's like, "Layers, bro." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So
two is one, one is none.
Right, but when I met Justin, coming from having a large board, he would play with bare minimum, and it literally made me change my perspective on okay, maybe I don't need 7 overdrives, maybe I don't need multiple delays, and it's great to have that kind of stuff and to utilize that stuff, but I after that NAMM, the first NAMM I went to when I met him, I shrunk my board down, and it was so much easier to focus on playing, and there's less things I have to worry about, and it's less weight. And I was only 20 at the time, so I was like, oh, I'm a young kid, I can carry on these boards, but throwing something compact on your back was super cool. But yeah, he's a monster player. After meeting him, I was like, hearing him play through just an acoustic, I can't even imagine what he plays through as an electric.
Right.
And then I heard him and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm done, guys. But yeah, no, I like that.
I think the thing that I love about all this as well, and I'd be curious if you agree, Justin, but I feel like with guitar playing, whenever I've shrunk my board, and life in general, if I can go that broad, creativity thrives with limitations. And I feel like if you have you're used to playing with 10 pedals, reverbs, delays, overdrives, all sorts of different things, multi-effects, and you give yourself a 4-pedal minimum, no multi-effects allowed, and you have to play the same gigs or you have to play the same sessions, you will figure out how to get there, but you might have to learn a new technique. You might have to change your amp settings. You might have to, switch up your signal chain. Like, you have to get creative. And I feel like limiting yourself on purpose only makes you a better musician, because everything has to shift to get a better end result. And I feel like my best leaps forward in guitar is when I've had significant limitations that I've put on myself. And often for me, that's drastically changing my board to be tiny. And I always love the results, and I enjoy playing more. Like, everything seems to improve. I don't know if you would find something similar, maybe in a different context. I'm not sure, but have you found, limitations being helpful in your playing in your career?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that you just summed it up basically, like that was the whole reason that I started taking a small amp and like a fuzz pedal, if anything, to a gig. And then, the thing that a lot of people don't get in this town is that you don't have to be in the most amazing situation to just play your ass off, But it's something that took me a while to learn. Like, I'm really good at complaining when I want to. I can find anything to complain about, no matter the situation. And yeah, I'm not bragging. But like, you could be brand new to town and you've got your eyes set on, I want to be on a session with, Dan Huff or whatever producer, and you're playing some gig for $150 with someone who sings kind of pitchy and the drummer's maybe doesn't have the tightest pocket, and man, you'd be nice if the bass player would tune between songs because you can tell that it's a little out. You can find all these negative things to focus on, but at the end of the day, the only thing you can control is what you do, and you can still choose to set yourself up in a way to inspire yourself. And for me, live, it's exactly what you were talking about. Like, eliminate the board. Let's crank the amp and let's go out for blood. Like, I want everybody to know that I've practiced and I'm playing my ass off. Regardless of what else is happening on stage, I'm doing the right thing for my spot. And that's what I can control. So that's what I'm going to give 150% to. And man, I tell you, like, early on when I was doing a bunch of live gigs, like, people would come up to me right after and they're like, hey, I don't know you. You sounded great. Can I get your phone number? And I thought, oh man, this is happening so fast. This is amazing. It still happens a lot slower than you want it to, from where you start to where you want to be. You set these goals. And I still think that's a good thing, that it happens more slowly. You don't want to be really green and get in a room with somebody who, could start calling you all the time. Like, if you only get one chance at a first impression, I guess is what I'm saying. Mm. And so things happened a lot slower than I wanted them to, but they did happen. And I think a lot of it was me worrying about the stuff I can worry about. And I think what you're really talking about is being able to get more out of yourself, switching things up because you're getting a little bit stale for your own ear.
Exactly.
So let's change what's at our feet. Let's change. Like, I would take a Strat to a rock session, with a single coil in the bridge. And what do you got to do? Well, I probably need to roll the tone back a little bit. I probably need to pick a little farther away from the bridge. I probably need to set the amp differently. Like, I'm not going to it's not going to sound just like a Les Paul, but I can get a big sound out of it by all these subtle adjustments, And I think that's the same sort of thing. Like you reduce your options, it changes how you play, you hear new things out of yourself, you get inspired, and that translates to other people who are listening.
I have a 1,000,001 questions for you, and I know the other guys do as well. This could go for hours. But before we keep moving, Mason, do you want to do a couple of
Yes, I would like to speak to you about a few sponsors, listeners, for that all make this podcast possible. The first of which is our friends over at the Guitar Sanctuary. And as you know, Brian Omilion loves the Guitar Sanctuary so much, he's actually there right now building pedal boards. And if you're interested in having a rig built by an industry professional, Brian Omilion could be that guy. And at the Guitar Sanctuary, they are one of the premier dealers of pedals, pedal boards, amps, guitars. All the things that you need are available there, and Brian can assemble them all for you on a beautiful pedal board exactly the way that you want it. So check them out over at guitarsanctuary.com over in McKinney, Texas. Tell Brian the Chairman sent you. Also, our friends over at Sweetwater and their amazing new program, the Gear Exchange. This is a used buying and selling community that Sweetwater has created. And the very cool thing that I think really differentiates it from other places like Reverb or eBay is if you sell on the Sweetwater Gear Exchange, you don't have to pay any fees. That's right, 0 fees. So long as you decide to take your earnings and put them onto a Sweetwater gift card. You can use it as a glorified layaway program, sell the gear that you're not using, save up, and redeem that gift card for something at Sweetwater that you do want. Check it out at sweetwater.com/used. And lastly, our friends over at Mono Creators. What I would say is probably the best gig bag in the business. Our friends over at Mono make all sorts of things from gig bags to pedal boards to various accessories, including their newly released power supply. And they're offering our listeners a special discount code. Using the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, you get 10% off your entire order over at monocreators.com. Go over there, check it out, use it to buy a gig bag, use it to buy a pedal board or any sort of pedal board accessories, and you won't regret it. Let's get back to the podcast and back to Justin. So Justin, we've talked a bit about pedals and pedal boards. You've talked a little bit about your amps of choice, very Mike Campbell influence. And interestingly enough, I don't think Mike Campbell gets enough credit for the session work that he did separately from any of the things that he did with Tom Petty. And if you're confused about the session work, you should listen to pretty much any of the Danny Korchmar produced Don Henley stuff. He's all over that. The Wallflowers, that album that was in maybe 96, I forget the name of it, but he's all over that too. And he's a really amazing session guitar player as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He just, the king of playing the absolute right thing. Like you hear his parts on songs and you can't imagine anything else.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, he's incredible. Now, if we were to migrate to a similar line of questioning around guitars, I'm always filling out my guitar collection because I fantasize about being a session man, but my only audience is the people that are willing to endure my guitar playing on YouTube. But I always feel like I'm adding different flavors here, imagining that I'm the session musician in my own world. If you were to say to somebody sort of staple guitars that you feel like you need, now I know you've said that you've just shown up to rock, sessions with the Strat, but if you were to say you were going to have the guitar boat and you have 5 guitars that can fit in it and you want to be in the Nashville session scene, what are the 5 guitars that you feel like need to be in there to sort of cover the gamut of sounds that you might be requested to, let's say, invoke as part of the session and the song?
Okay, so I have to constrain myself to 5.
Yeah.
This is yeah, we're reducing our options to be more creative. Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah. And we'll
do it.
separate acoustic for this, because obviously that's going to be a different thing. We'll restrict it to 5 electric guitars. Let's say that.
Right. Okay. So right off the top of my head, I think you have to have a Telecaster. For a while there, we sort of got away from them. In the early 2000s and the 2010s, it was more about a Les Paul or an SG into a Marshall or like an 18 watt, or whatever. We are far enough away from 90s country that it's come back around. And so those sorts of tones, and of course it's got a modern twist. There's always the modern pop element to it, but being able to cop those sounds and that style of playing, you have to have a Tele. So Telecaster for sure. The second guitar that I would probably make sure I had is a 335. I just feel like it's one of the most versatile guitars out there for just having 2 pickups, and it can be big like a Les Paul. It can cut like a Tele. You can sometimes get that smoky, throaty, almost Strat sound out of the neck pickup. It's a little more articulate than like a Les Paul neck pickup can be often. It just seems to fit in the mix really well. Sometimes you can make it soft and airy. You can make it aggressive. So Tele and a 335. Sometimes, like I had a session last night, and I took a Tele, a 335, and my Novo, and that is a sort of modern twist on a Jazzmaster. I would say a Jazzmaster is really, really effective right now, especially with the sort of cleanish, almost garage tone, clean parts, like sort of driving, like pop stuff. It's not gorgeous sounding, but it's the right kind of grungy and almost sort of ugly cleans, like a Jazzmaster, middle position, a little bit of compression, a little bit of reverb. I have a Jazzmaster I absolutely adore. It's a Danicaster. People have seen that a lot on my channel. Sometimes I'll take that and the Novo. The Novo has a little more aggressive sound. It has P90s in it. There's a little more bark to it. And it is about the most comfortable guitar I've ever played. They're doing really cool stuff. I think it's worth the price of admission, and they're modern classics to me. So those 3, man, there's nothing like a Les Paul as far as just that Kerrang, and a really good Les Paul you can get a lot of good sounds out of. So maybe that would be number 4.
Do you think that like the custom versus just like a Les Paul standard is a perceptible difference in a mix, or because I saw that you had gotten that 69 custom. I have a 74. It's surprising, the lightest 74 you'll ever find. It's 8 pounds and 3 ounces.
Whoa!
Not chambered or anything,
Really?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I have never played
light.
For a
That's
Les
light
Paul.
for a Les Paul
for a
custom from that era.
Yeah. Dude, they're mostly 10 plus.
Weren't they made out of just pure steel for a while?
It feels like it.
Yeah,
that was one of the sandwich layers.
Oh
my
man.
gosh.
Just like Mom used to make. Yeah.
My main Les Paul is a custom. I have 2 Les Pauls that are not the standard thing. They're not a Les Paul standard with humbuckers. I've got a custom with humbuckers, and then I have a gold top with a wrap tail and P90s. And they both do that Kerrang thing. The gold top sounds like just a massive Tele. Man, I don't know. Sometimes I have a hard time deciding what to take. I've spent such a long time amassing a bunch of keepers, Yeah. And so I'm like, which one do I want to take? And sometimes it comes down to what's got the freshest strings. I want something with single coils. I want something with humbuckers, I haven't played that in a while. You know, this kid's feeling like he hasn't got much attention. Let's take him to work. So those and a Strat probably, or a baritone. It's hard for me to have 5 guitars and one of them not be a baritone, but I will retune down to baritone levels if I don't actually have one with me.
So let's say this guitar boat that Mason is talking about is starting to sink, and you have to take one of them. What's your one guitar? If you had to encapsulate everything we just chatted about, you can say one guitar for a session, and that's going to be the session guitar for the next year. Which guitar do you grab?
Wow, for the next year. Okay, so this has nothing to do with what their values are and what I have invested into each instrument.
Usability. Let's go for that.
Okay. Man, it might have to be my Jazzmaster, that Dano Jazzmaster.
Really?
And that has humbuckers in it? Or does it have P90s?
It doesn't. It's got Jazzmaster pickups. Here, I'll get it out. I'll play it for y'all and just show you some of the sounds that I can get out of it, because I feel like I can do the sort of snarly telly stuff out of it. I can get great neck pickup tones out of it. It responds well to rolling the volume off. This is the guitar. A bunch of players in town, we talk about if we could have a set of guitars where we got one from each session guy. Everybody says, hands down, the one they'd take from me is my Jazzmaster. They'd take Tom's Burst, obviously, Rob McNally's 55 Telly, or his Strat. And Rob's got a bunch of amazing guitars. Oh man, I think Derek's SG, Kenny Greenberg's, maybe his Duesenberg with the palm bender. Anyway, let me grab this. And I've got this properly routed through the audio, so our listeners will hear what they hear on my channel.
Yeah,
as well.
You actually, I think right now, while you're tuning, this is the first live audio we have ever had on the podcast. I don't want to put of any undue pressure here. I know you're a bit unfamiliar with playing live and playing in front of people, but just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
So that's neck pickup.
I think, Justin, because the audio that might be selected is still on your AirPods, I think it's not getting whatever's coming through your interface. And so we see you playing, but we don't hear anything.
You're looking good.
Okay.
You look great.
But I'm recording all my audio, and when people hear it, they'll hear it.
Yeah, okay. We'll make sure that all the audio is properly synchronized. But if you don't see any response from us, it's because
just describe to us what you're hearing, and then we'll go with that.
We'll just go with all of our minds blown. Yeah, we'll just.
Yeah, it looks like it sounds great.
Yeah.
So for your listeners, this is a pretty gnarly. And I don't know, it's big, it's aggressive. I can still get a lot of the... And I need to tune again. But I feel like I can approximate a telly on the bridge pickup. I can approximate at least a P90 Les Paul. And then I can also get some of these really, I don't know, cleanish R&B sort of I can do Strat stuff on it. It speaks well with slide. For whatever reason, this guitar and me get along really well, and I feel like I can do about anything on it. So that would be
do your
the
Steve
one.
Cropper licks if you need them.
Oh yeah, maybe not that bright. You got to pick real close to the bridge.
If you want to play some Sam and Dave.
So anyway.
And what are you using for? What are you using for an amp right now? Is this a mic'd up amp or is this a amp synth?
It is. Yeah, it's my Sarge. It's kind of my home base for home recording.
Awesome.
It's for people who aren't familiar with Analog Outfitters, it's an amp built out of the chassis of a Hammond A100, and I think the circuit is like a 5E3, but it has EL84s. And it has the massive iron of a Hammond. It's a heavy little amp, but it breaks up real early. I don't have an ISO box in my garage. I have a very small garage, and the space is a premium in there, and so I just don't have the room to build like the sort of ISO box I had at my old house in my old studio. So I prefer to use amps that give up the goods at low volumes at home. And it's just sort of home base. All of my guitars sound like themselves through it. It doesn't take over in any way. All my pedals, everything, the way I push the front end of the amp is really pleasing to me.
Speaking of that, where you're talking about, space and stuff with studios, do you ever utilize like those load box, like aux box amp into those aux box things to do those direct in recording options?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have an aux. I have a 2-Notes Torpedo. I have a Rev D20, and I actually have a Black Star 100 water that I am really impressed with for being like a $1,000 amp. It sounds really good, and it fits that gap in my arsenal, I guess. Like I don't have a extremely punchy 100 watter that's capable of high gain, and that amp, like the Rev, has its own cab modeling, and I can go direct with it and just crank the snot out of it. And that stuff's catching up. As long as there's a tube pre and power amp happening, I don't mind the modeling happening after that. If there's real electrons going around in tubes,
very cool.
I'm okay with modeling the cab and all that.
It's the science. It's all about the science. Electrons, tubes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I like that. I have a question for you about the importance of home studio rigs and gear that you'd want to use if you're wanting to get, like, let's say someone like myself is wanting to get into this world. Before I get there, though, I want to finish off with our last two sponsors, if that's okay. I want to tell you guys about two of them. The first one being Bestronix at btpa.com. This is the place you need to go if you need pedalboard accessories, cable, looms, plugs, anything you need to finish off your board. Brad at BTPA is going to help you out. So check them out, btpa.com. Use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, to get 10% off or 90% away from free on your order. And tell Brad the Chairman sent you. I also want to tell you about Stringjoy, which I believe is local to you over there, Justin. Stringjoy makes incredible USA-made strings, from vintage specs to modern, coated or uncoated. Stringjoy has you covered at stringjoy.com. They also have a subscription service if you want to get them sent regularly in packs, or you can just buy a single pack as well. The coupon code BOARDS, BOARDS, will work for any of the above options. So check them out at stringjoy.com. So, Justin, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, for our listeners, I feel like even for, all of us starting our own businesses, I feel like it is a huge risk, or when you're at the beginning of this. So when you were, I think in 2006, you mentioned you moved to Nashville. Yeah. And I don't know if that's when the full-time career started. I'm not sure about that. But whenever the move was, like, I'm going for it. I'm going to go full-time. I'm going all in on this thing. you take a big risk in doing that step. And I'm curious, with that step, how important is it to be able to do this, record sessions, record extra tracks at home? And if so, what is similar to the guitar boat of 5 guitars? What would be your essential starter kit for being able to record at home if you feel like that's an important step in this process?
Yeah, so if that's your goal, to make money recording guitar for other people, you need to start doing that as soon as you can. You need to start figuring out how to mic a speaker, how to get good sounds. You need to start learning what it sounds like to have a 57 right on the cone of a speaker versus playing live and having a combo amp at your knees blowing past your legs, not pointed right at your head. Like it's a wildly different sound, and you need to learn how to play under the microscope of having a 57 and a Royer like that close to your speaker cab or whatever. And so for me, at my old house, I had a detached 1-car garage, and I spent a bunch of money converting that into a studio. And it wasn't so that I knew that I was never going to make back what I invested in building this thing out. But the goal was for me to have a space, and I had a big ISO room. I had multiple layers of drywall. I'd had them decoupled with green glue. I had bass traps. I had all sorts of treatment in the room. It was a cinder block building. I dropped the ceilings. I did all this stuff to where I could crank my Bassman into a 212 or 412 in that garage. And you could kind of hear it if you were in my backyard, but it didn't disturb anybody. So I could be out there, just experimenting with sounds for hours and hours. And so Nashville's a Pro Tools town. So Pro Tools would be one thing. An Apollo Twin, I think will get everybody up and running. And then, if you want to splurge on a real preamp, that's cool, but you can use plugins. Some of the Apollo stuff is pretty great. Like get a bundle of them and see what you think sounds good. And then start getting as good of sounds as you can, on the mic. Learn what the levels are of your preamp versus how hot the amp is versus how hard you're playing, and just start recording. And, for me, when I made the transition to get off the road and start recording, I just told people, hey, I do sessions now. And I would have like 1 or 2 a month, maybe, but I would make sure that I went over and above and just really, like, somebody would call me to do a $50 overdub, and they had worked with a band on a session for their songs. And it's not that somebody played something wrong on the session. You can't think of it that way. It's just that sometimes things move so quickly in Nashville that it's not until after that writer or artist or producer sits with the tracks that they think, man, I wonder if this could be different. I wonder if we could get something like this. And so that's how I sort of started getting my first gigs. Is I had some friends who were engineers, and I said, hey, I will help, quote unquote, fix. Like, there's nothing wrong with what's there, but maybe they want to try something else, and they're not in the studio anymore with that band. Like, I will do that in a very budget-friendly fashion. I will do whatever it takes to make it sound right. And that started translating to, let's just get him on the session in the first place, So I would say a MacBook, Pro Tools, an Apollo Twin, some of the new Princeton reverbs that Fender's putting out sound really great. Get a 57 and a mic cable, And if you don't have a place where you can isolate your cabinet, then, in order to not color what you're hearing, wear these. These are like shooting range earmuffs, or construction site earmuffs that you get for $20 from Home Depot. They're made by Peltor. But this guy, GK Music, I feel like I'm spreading the gospel of GK Music Ultraphones all the time. I don't have any sort of deal with them. I pay full price, but these allow me to sit in extremely loud environments without hurting my ears. I listen ultra quietly because every guy and girl who has been a session player in Nashville, who's in the generations before me, they almost all of them suffer from tinnitus. Some of in a debilitating way. Like I'm not going to name any names, but I see some guys who have been playing sessions in Nashville for 30 years or so, like they're watching my lips when I talk because they can't hear what I'm saying. They're trying to read my lips. And I hear them take their cans off, and I'm still sitting out on the floor trying to play a solo or something, and their cans are so loud it's distorting. And it's like they have to do that just to be able to do their job. And then they can't sleep at night because they have debilitating tinnitus, you know? And so those headphones allow me to listen so quietly. Like I'm terrified of tinnitus, and you know, I can sit next to a drum kit and the ride cymbal, like he can be just wearing that thing out. And then when he's not playing, or when he's doing a percussion pass and I'm playing my second guitar pass, I don't have to change any of the levels in my cue box at all because I'm so well isolated. The hard thing about them is that they kind of squeeze your head and they make you sweaty and they can get a little bit gross and you got to clean off the pads, you know? But man, I'll take it to be able to go to sleep at night without just, you know, in my ears, you know?
Right.
So
no, well, I'm going to check those out. I'll put them in the description too if people want to check those out.
Yeah, and I have no affiliation with them other than they save my ears, and that's why I use them. So if you're recording at home with a few little things and a combo amp, and you want to hear what's actually going on, you have to isolate, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Justin, I know that you have to run here in a few minutes, and I just wanted to thank you for indulging our questions about the Nashville session scene, the gear as far as pedals, pedal boards, amplifiers, and guitars. I hope that for anybody that is considering coming to Nashville, and it seems like there are, you know, just a slew of people that move there every day. I know that there was some crazy statistic for a long time about how many new residents Nashville was absorbing on a daily basis, that they have maybe a little bit clearer idea of some of the tools that they may need as they start to hone their craft as a Nashville guitar player. But I'm super appreciative of you coming on. For all of you who are listening, please do check out the show notes in the description to see Justin's channel, and he's just a great resource to have, and you get to hear some amazing guitar playing on top of that, which is a bonus. And thank you for all that you do, and you know, making an impact on the music that a lot of us listen to by way of your guitar tones and your tasty note choices.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this was very cool.
Yes,
thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, for all of you listeners, we will see you a little further down the road to Tone Town. Hopefully one day we get to our destination, but you know, as they say, it's about the journey and not the destination. So with that, we will leave you for today. See you later.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.